Welcome back to News Talk. Tomorrow, the nation's first African-American president will stand on the very spot where the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood a half-century ago. He'll be joined by at least two former presidents and a who's who of the civil rights movement past and present. Joining us now to preview the 50th anniversary commemoration of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, head of the Rainbow Push Coalition. Reverend Jackson, it's always great having you here.
To you, sir.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for being here today.
You know, he'll stand there tomorrow, but not so much in Dr. King's tradition. He'll stand in the tradition of Lincoln and Roosevelt and Kennedy and Johnson. And so we must see him as an African American who must be judged by presidential standards. Dr. King was in a different kind of prophetic preach. He was inspiring us to keep fighting, expecting the government to respond. And so the Johnson response to the speech is as significant as anything else in this equation.
And I was at the event on Saturday, and I know that the remarks you prepared, which are here, are much longer than time permitted. Everyone was under a very short time constraint Saturday. And what you wrote, but just time didn't permit, is remarkable as a historical document, and it's remarkable in terms of where Martin Luther King Jr. was sort of internally as we moved through the period of the mid-60s.
To the White House and the Congress and the courts, saying we need freedom and equality. Today we are freer, but we are less equal. On the day he spoke, it was a speech against degradation, humiliation. Black soldiers had to sit behind lots of prisoners of war. From Texas across to Florida up to Virginia, Maryland, we couldn't use a single public toilet. We could not buy ice cream at Howard Johnson or use the rent a room at the Holiday Inn. It was humiliation and degradation. But then the question was, how would the White House respond to the speech? Our hopes were great that Kennedy would respond. Then he was killed November 22nd, and our hopes were dashed. Little did we know that Johnson would emerge the strongest president on civil rights since Abraham Lincoln, who passed the most civil rights legislation of any president ever. So what we need today is the constitutional right to vote, since the states' rights trying to take it back now, a revival of the war on poverty, a plan for reconstruction, a plan for working poor people, a plan to revive the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and a plan to student debt forgiveness is out of hand. So we need a presidential response to the marches.
I was about halfway back through the crowd on Saturday, and during a passage in your speech where you said something very similar to what you just said here now, that phrase, that reference to student loan debt forgiveness drew to my ear, significantly larger response, applause. You know,
good minds want to apply to school, others can't stay. Last year, for example, the black colleges alone lost about 20,000 students to Parent Plus loans plan, and $170 million was lost to black colleges, for example. The Parent Plus loans is very hurtful. The summer Pell Grants were cut. And so students by the thousands couldn't get a summer job and couldn't stay in summer school, so that we expected them to close the big STEM gap, but at the same time we're cutting off the ability to get there. So what we need tomorrow, in addition to motivation, is appropriation and legislation to close the gap. 31 cities, black joblessness is above 40%. 6 is above 50%. And that includes New York City. So as opposed to talking about stop and frisk, stop and employ. Stop and rebuild torn down houses. Stop and raise workable wages for working class people. That needs to be the stop.
It's a remarkably broad coalition. It was in 1963 and in the civil rights era generally. But listening to the bill of particulars, if you will, that was expressed from the podium on Saturday, I was struck by how broad it was. There was talk of stand your ground. There was talk of immigration. There was talk of jobs, of course. LGBT issues. Is a movement that labor, workplace justice, and represent the rights of workers to organize. Is a coalition that broad really a coalition? Is it sustainable?
It is, because we live in our faith. We live under the law, and that law equality under the law must apply whether you are right to organize as a worker, whether you're LGBT. Your person, I mean, the person who organized the march, the organizer was Bayard Rustin, who was gay and profound and skilled. skillful and wise and pushed in the corner. That will not happen again. We've grown past that. The equality, equal rights of women, for example. The role of 18-year-olds. At that time, 18-year-olds could not vote. Guess what? They were serving in Vietnam. But now, today, we've won many of those freedoms, but we have not won the equality. So the gap, the North-South gap has gotten wider. And that's, I mean, so few people on Wall Street have so much. So many have so little, and the middle class is sinking. When you export jobs, and as we are in closing down the American class, you are weakening the middle class. When you target foreclosed private houses, you take away people's source of wealth, their house. So I would like to think that tomorrow's mission must be to address the issue of inequality. And someone said, well, rising tide lift all boats. A better analogy may be if you have a broke arm, you don't need to put a cast on too. Put the cast where the pain is. And black unemployment and Latino unemployment at levels of depression levels.